I'm Robin, and my story begins in a house that never truly felt like home. My mother, a successful dentist at a private clinic, married my father, who worked as a manager in a trading company. When they tied the knot, Dad moved into Mom's house. I came along a year later, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. One day, Dad came home early, his face twisted in anger. "I quit," he announced, throwing his briefcase onto the couch. "That damn boss can find someone else to push around." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The house filled with the sound of the TV and the click-clack of Dad's game controller. The smell of beer became a constant presence. I was young, but I wasn't blind. I saw the way Mom's smile tightened when she came home to find Dad sprawled on the couch, surrounded by empty cans. "John, you need to find a job," Mom would say, her voice strained. "I'm looking, Sarah." "What do you want from me?" Dad would shout back. "There's nothing out there that matches my skills and pay grade." Their arguments became a nightly ritual. I'd hide in my room, pillow over my ears, trying to block out their angry voices. During their worst fights, Mom would pack me off to Aunt Lisa's house. Aunt Lisa lived just a 15-minute drive away with Uncle Mark and my cousin Tommy, who was a couple years younger than me. I loved being at their house. It was always warm and filled with laughter. Uncle Mark would teach me and Tommy how to play board games, and Aunt Lisa would bake cookies that filled the whole house with the smell of chocolate and vanilla. "You know you're always welcome here, sweetie," Aunt Lisa would whisper to me as she tucked me in at night. No matter what. Those words were a lifeline. As much as I loved my parents, being at Aunt Lisa's felt more like home than my own house ever did. One day, after a particularly nasty fight, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Lisa in the kitchen. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Lisa," Mom sobbed. "But I have to try, for Robin's sake." I wanted to tell her she didn't have to, that I'd be okay if they split up. But the words stuck in my throat. I was just a kid, after all. What did I know about marriage and love? Little did I know, things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. Dad finally got a job, but it came with a catch: lots of business trips. At first, it seemed like a blessing. When Dad was away, the house was peaceful. Mom would help me with my homework, and we'd have quiet dinners together. But as the months went by, I started to notice something was off. The way Mom's face would tighten when Dad called to say he'd be away for another week. The hushed phone conversations she'd have with Aunt Lisa when she thought I couldn't hear. I was barely 8 when my world came crashing down. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, and Mom was helping me with my math homework when the doorbell rang. I remember the confusion on her face as she opened the door to a man I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Thompson? I'm Robert Hanson, John's boss," the man said, his voice tight with anger. I watched from the stairs as Mom led him into the living room. Their voices were hushed, but I could hear the tension in every word. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," Mr. Hanson said, "but your husband has been having an affair with my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Mom's hands start to shake. That's impossible," she whispered. "John's been on business trips." Mr. Hanson pulled out an envelope. "I'm afraid not. These are photos of them together. The dates, well, they match up with some of his supposed business trips." I couldn't see the photos from where I was, but I saw Mom's face crumple as she looked at them. Mr. Hanson's voice softened slightly. "I'm divorcing my wife. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Do with this information what you will." After he left, I found Mom sitting on the couch, tears streaming down her face. When she saw me, she quickly wiped her eyes. "Robin, honey, I need you to go stay with Aunt Lisa for a few days, okay?" Her voice was shaky, but she tried to smile. "Mom and Dad need to have a serious talk." I nodded, not knowing what else to do. As Aunt Lisa drove me to her house, I couldn't shake the image of Mom's tear-stained face from my mind. Days passed, and finally, Mom came to pick me up. Dad wasn't with her. "Where's Dad?" I asked as we drove home. Mom's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Dad and I, we're going to be living apart for a while, sweetheart. We're getting a divorce. I felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. For a while, it seemed like things might get better. Mom and I settled into a new routine, just the two of us. But then, everything changed again. It started with Mom feeling tired all the time. Then came the day she found a lump. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, holding Mom's hand as the doctor said the word that would change our lives forever: cancer. "We'll fight this, Robin," Mom said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. Together. But we weren't alone for long. Because just when I thought I'd seen the last of him, Dad came waltzing back into our lives. "I've changed," he said, standing on our doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. "I want to be here for you both." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but Mom let him in. She was too tired, too scared to fight anymore. Life took on a surreal quality after Mom's diagnosis. Our once orderly home became a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, chemotherapy sessions, and Dad's attempts at playing caretaker. "I quit my job," Dad announced one day, puffing out his chest like he deserved a medal. "Someone needs to take Sarah to her treatments and look after you, Robin." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But even at 9 years old, I could see through his act. The house grew messier by the day, with Dad only bothering to clean when Mom was due back from the hospital. "Robin, sweetie, can you tidy up a bit?" he'd ask, not even looking up from his phone. "Your mom's coming home tomorrow." I did my best, but what could a 9-year-old really do? The dishes piled up, laundry overflowed, and dust gathered on every surface. I wanted to tell Mom, to ask for help, but I couldn't bear to add to her worries. One day, I overheard Aunt Lisa talking to Uncle Mark in hushed tones. "Can you believe that bastard?" she hissed. "He didn't quit, he got fired. His boss kicked him out for sleeping with his wife." My heart sank. It was just another lie in a long string of deceptions. Then came the day that shattered what little faith I had left in my father. Aunt Lisa was driving me home early, Mom was in the hospital for another round of chemo, and Dad was supposed to be waiting for me. We walked into the house without knocking. The sound of giggles and creaking bed springs filled the air. Aunt Lisa's face turned red with fury as we stood there, frozen in the hallway. "John Thompson," she bellowed. "Get your ass out here right now." Dad stumbled out of the bedroom, hastily zipping up his pants. Behind him, a woman I recognized as Mr. Hansen's ex-wife peeked out, clutching a sheet to her chest. "Lisa," Dad said, his voice annoyingly casual. "You're early." Aunt Lisa was shaking with rage. "How dare you? Your wife is fighting for her life, and you're here, you're..." Dad just smirked. "Come on, Lisa. Sarah's sick. A man has needs." I felt sick to my stomach. Aunt Lisa opened her mouth to yell again, but Dad cut her off. "You won't tell Sarah about this," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "It would only make her condition worse. You wouldn't want that on your conscience, would you?" Aunt Lisa's face paled. She grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the house. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, Robin," she said as we drove away. "Your father, he's not a good man." I nodded, feeling numb. "I know," I whispered. "I don't love him anymore." For the next year, I lived in a state of constant tension. I'd go to school, pretending everything was normal. I'd visit Mom in the hospital, holding her hand and telling her about my day, carefully omitting anything about Dad. And then, one cold autumn morning, the call came. Mom was gone. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a world that suddenly made no sense. Aunt Lisa held me as I sobbed, while Dad just stood there, looking almost relieved. The day we buried Mom was the hardest of my life. I stood there, numb and hollow, as they lowered her casket into the ground. Dad put on quite a show, sniffling and dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. A week after the funeral, we met with Mom's lawyer. I sat there, picking at a loose thread on my black dress, as the lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. To my beloved daughter, Robin, he said, I leave all my worldly possessions, including our family home and all my savings. The room went dead silent. I looked up, confused, to see Dad's face turning an ugly shade of purple. What the hell, he exploded. That can't be right. I'm her husband. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. I'm afraid it's all very clear, Mr. Thompson. Your daughter inherits everything. She'll be able to manage the property from the age of 18. Dad whirled on Aunt Lisa, who was sitting beside me. You, he snarled. You put her up to this, didn't you? Poisoned her against me. Aunt Lisa just looked at him, her eyes cold. Sarah knew you, John. She knew you better than you think. We left the office with Dad still ranting. For the next few days, he barely looked at me, like I was the one who had betrayed him. But I was too lost in my grief to care. 3 months crawled by. I was sitting in my room one afternoon, flipping through an old photo album, when I heard unfamiliar laughter from downstairs. Curious, I crept down to find Dad in the living room with a woman I recognized all too well, his mistress, Mr. Hansen's ex-wife. Robin, Dad said, his voice falsely cheery. Come meet Candy. She's going to be living with us now. Candy gave me a wide, fake smile. Hi, sweetie. You should call me Mom from now on, okay? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. She is not my mother, I spat out. Over the next few days, Candy went on a rampage through our house. I watched, helpless and furious, as she packed away all of Mom's photos, her knickknacks, everything that made the house feel like home. We need to make room for our new family, she chirped, ignoring my glare as she shoved another box of Mom's things into the attic. I retreated to my room, clutching the few photos of Mom I'd managed to save. As I sat there, surrounded by the last remnants of my mother's presence, I made a silent promise, I won't let them erase Mom. Life in what used to be my home became increasingly unbearable. Dad and Candy settled into a lifestyle of lazy indulgence that made my stomach turn. They never worked a day, content to live off the rent from Candy's apartment and the monthly allowance that came into my account, money Mom had left for my care. See, Robin? Dad would say, sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand. This is the good life. No need to work ourselves to death like your mother did. Candy was no better. She'd spend hours online shopping, boxes of clothes and makeup arriving almost daily. We deserve nice things, she'd say, modeling yet another new dress. Meanwhile, I was growing out of my clothes, my shoes falling apart. When I'd ask for money for new ones, Dad would scowl. Christ, Robin, do you ever stop growing? Do you know how expensive it is to raise a teenager? They'd go on lavish vacations, leaving me behind with Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark. Part of me was relieved to escape the toxic atmosphere at home, but another part felt the sting of rejection. As my 16th birthday approached, I realized I couldn't rely on Dad for anything anymore. I needed my own money, my own independence. That's when I saw the help wanted sign in the window of Joe's coffee shop. That first shift was brutal. My feet ached, my arms burned from carrying trays, and I went home smelling like coffee grounds and dish soap. But I felt a spark of pride I hadn't experienced in years. When I got my first paycheck, I almost cried. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd earned it. What's this? Dad asked one day, noticing my new phone. Where'd you get the money for that? I got a job, I said, bracing for his reaction. He snorted. A job? What do you need a job for? We provide everything you need. I bit back a bitter laugh. They provided the bare minimum, spending most of my money on themselves. But I just shrugged. I wanted some extra cash. As the months went by, I worked every shift I could get. I saved every penny, hiding the money in a locked box under a loose floorboard in my room. Slowly, I built up a wardrobe of clothes that actually fit, bought school supplies without having to beg, treated myself to small luxuries like books and art supplies. More importantly, I was building something else: confidence, independence, and a burning determination to take control of my life. As I approached my 18th birthday, a sense of anticipation filled me. Freedom was so close I could almost taste it. But life, as I'd learned, had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. It started with the sound of hammering and drilling. I came home from school one day to find the house in chaos, with workers tramping in and out. "What's going on?" I asked, dodging a man carrying a bucket of paint. Candy waddled over, her face flushed with excitement. She grabbed my hands, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, Robin, we have wonderful news. We're having a baby." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad appeared behind her, grinning from ear to ear. "Isn't it great, kiddo? You're going to be a big sister." I forced a smile, feeling more alone than ever. "Yeah, great." As the weeks passed, I watched as they transformed the house. New furniture arrived, walls were repainted, and baby items started appearing everywhere. I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible and unwanted. Then, a month before my 18th birthday, everything fell apart. I came home from school, exhausted after a long shift at the coffee shop, to find the door to my room closed. A cute little sign hung on it, reading "Baby's Room" in pastel letters. "Dad? Candy?" I called out, a sense of dread filling me. They appeared from the living room, Candy's pregnant belly leading the way. Dad had a strange look on his face, a mix of satisfaction and determination. "Robin," he said, his voice oddly formal. "Candy and I have been talking. We need your room for the nursery. We think it's best if you move out." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Move out? But, where am I supposed to go? Candy bustled forward, shoving a suitcase into my hands. "Don't worry, I packed your things myself. You should thank me, really. I made sure to include all your important stuff." I opened the suitcase, seeing a jumble of clothes and a few personal items. Everything else, my books, my art supplies, the mementos of Mom, were gone. But this is my home," I stammered, tears welling up in my eyes. Dad's face hardened. "Not anymore. It's time for you to grow up, Robin." I fled, suitcase in hand, tears streaming down my face. I found myself at Aunt Lisa's doorstep, sobbing as I told her what happened. Aunt Lisa's face turned stormy. Those. She took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. "Don't worry, sweetie. You'll stay with us. This isn't over." She marched to the phone and called her lawyer, explaining the situation in rapid-fire words. I sat on the couch, feeling numb as she talked. Finally, she hung up and turned to me, a fierce light in her eyes. "Robin, listen to me. That house? It's yours. Your mother left it to you, remember? You can't officially manage it until you're 18, but in 1 month, you'll be able to do whatever you want with it." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. So they can't just kick me out?" Aunt Lisa shook her head. "No, they can't. And once you're 18, you can kick them out." For the first time in years, I felt a smile, a real, genuine smile, spread across my face. 1 month, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Just 1 more month. As I settled into Aunt Lisa's guest room that night, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, hurt, but also a growing sense of determination. Dad and Candy thought they'd won, that they'd finally gotten rid of me. But they had no idea what was coming. The morning of my 18th birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that today was the day everything would change. Uncle Mark drove Aunt Lisa and me to the house, my house. As we pulled up, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. We marched up to the front door, and I knocked loudly, my heart pounding in my chest. After a moment, the door swung open. Dad stood there, his face darkening when he saw us. Behind him, Candy waddled into view, her pregnant belly even bigger than I remembered. "What are you doing here?" Dad demanded, not even acknowledging that it was my birthday. I straightened my shoulders, looking him directly in the eye. I'm 18 today, Dad. Or did you forget? He scowled. That doesn't explain why you're here. Without a word, I handed him the envelope containing the eviction notice. His face turned red as he read it, his hands shaking with anger. What the hell is this? He shouted. It's an eviction notice, I said calmly. You have 1 month to vacate the premises. Candy burst into tears. You can't do this, she wailed. I'm due in a few weeks. Where are we supposed to go? I felt a twinge of guilt, but I pushed it aside. You have an apartment, don't you? The one you've been renting out? You won't be homeless. They started shouting then, calling me cruel, ungrateful, a monster. I stood my ground, Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark flanking me supportively. We're not leaving, Dad yelled. This is our home. I stepped forward, pushing past them into the house. No, it's not, it's my home. And if you won't leave voluntarily, I'll have no choice but to involve the police. Dad sputtered, I put money into this place. All the renovations. With Mom's money, I reminded him. You haven't spent a dime of your own. He lunged forward, looking like he might actually hit me, but Uncle Mark stepped between us. Dad backed down immediately, the fight going out of him. Candy, still sobbing, tugged on Dad's arm. John, what are we going to do? The tenants in my apartment won't be out for a month. I shrugged, feeling a coldness I didn't know I possessed. That sounds like a you problem. But I'll honor the law. You have 1 month from today, not a day more. We left them standing there, shocked and angry. As we drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life. The month following my 18th birthday was a war of attrition. Dad and Candy, bitter about their impending eviction, did everything they could to make my life miserable. They'd accidentally break dishes, leaving shards for me to clean up. I'd come home to find walls freshly stained with paint splatters, always small enough to be deemed accidental. The house I'd grown up in, the home my mother had lovingly cared for, was becoming a battlefield. Oops, Candy would say with faux innocence, after knocking over yet another vase. Pregnancy makes me so clumsy. I gritted my teeth and endured, counting down the days until I could reclaim my space. Then, one day before their month was up, Candy went into labor. I watched from my window as Dad rushed her to the car, speeding off to the hospital. A plan formed in my mind. I spent the next few hours in a whirlwind of activity. I packed up their belongings, every shirt, every knick-knack, every reminder of their presence. I lugged boxes to the garage, filling it to the brim. Then, I called a locksmith to change the locks. As night fell, I heard a car pull up. Angry voices filled the air, followed by pounding on the door. Robin, open this door right now, Dad's voice boomed. I stood on the other side, heart racing but resolve firm. Your month is up. You need to leave. Are you insane? He shouted. We have a newborn baby. You can't do this. Candy's wails joined the cacophony. Please, Robin, have a heart. For a moment, I hesitated. But then I remembered all the times they'd shown me no mercy, no consideration. Your things are in the garage, I called out. I suggest you take them and go to your apartment. If you're not gone in an hour, I'm calling the police. They hurled insults at me, calling me every name in the book. But I stood firm. An hour later, I watched from the window as they loaded their things into their car, Dad red-faced with fury, Candy cradling their newborn and shooting me venomous glares. As they drove away, I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a sense of finality. A chapter of my life had closed, and a new one was beginning. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, erasing every trace of Dad and Candy's presence. I restored Mom's photos to their rightful places, feeling her presence with me as I reclaimed our home. When it came time for college, I made the decision to live in the dorms. I wanted to experience life, To be around people my age after years of isolation. Are you sure you want to rent out the house? Aunt Lisa asked as she helped me move into my dorm room. I nodded. It's the practical thing to do. Plus, I don't think I'm ready to live there full time yet. Too many memories. She squeezed my shoulder. I understand. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on the place for you. As I settled into college life, I felt a freedom I'd never known before. I made friends, joined clubs, threw myself into my studies. The weight I'd been carrying for years slowly began to lift. One evening, as I sat in my dorm room studying, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. It was the first I'd heard from him since the eviction. Candy and I are struggling, it read. The baby needs things. Can you help us out? I stared at the message for a long moment, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. Then, with a decisive click, I blocked his number. Some might call it cruel, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't heal if I kept that toxicity in my life. Mom had given me the tools to build a better future, and I intended to honor her memory by doing just that. I never knew my father. He died when I was just 3, leaving behind nothing but a handful of photos and a single video of him holding me as a baby. My name's Elizabeth, and this is my story. Growing up with my mom wasn't easy. She was always afraid of being alone, cycling through boyfriends faster than I could learn their names. It was a revolving door of men, each one leaving as quickly as he came. The only stability in my life came from my grandmother, my mom's mother. She was my rock, my safe haven. Whenever things got too chaotic at home, which was often, Grandma would swoop in and take me to her place. Come on, Elizabeth, she'd say, her voice warm and comforting. Let's go make some cookies. Those weekends at Grandma's were like entering a different world. Her house was always quiet, peaceful. No shouting, no slamming doors, no strange men stumbling around in the middle of the night. Just me and Grandma, baking cookies, reading books, or tending to her small garden. I often wondered about my dad's parents. Mom told me they'd cut ties after Dad died, disapproving of her moving on so quickly. But I suspected there was more to the story. Mom wasn't exactly reliable when it came to the truth. School was my escape. I threw myself into my studies, partly because I enjoyed learning, but mostly because it was a distraction from the chaos at home. Mom was rarely involved in my education, or anything else in my life for that matter. I learned to be independent out of necessity. By the time I was 10, I was cooking my own meals, doing my own laundry, and helping myself with homework. Mom was too busy chasing her next relationship to bother with such trivial things. Everything changed when I turned 12. Mom finally got married to a man named Frank. She was over the moon, convinced he was her last chance at happiness. This is it, Lizzie, she gushed. We're finally going to be a real family. But Frank had other ideas. From day one, he made it clear that I was an inconvenience, a reminder of Mom's past that he'd rather forget. Listen up, kid, he growled at me on the first night he moved in. I don't want to see or hear you unless it's absolutely necessary. You stay in your room and keep out of our way, got it? Life under Frank's rule was a far cry from anything resembling a real family. He ruled our house with an iron fist, and I quickly learned that silence and invisibility were my best defenses. You think you can just freeload off us? Frank would snarl. You're gonna earn your keep, girl. And earn it I did. Every penny spent on me was accounted for and expected to be repaid through chores and perfect grades. While my classmates sported new clothes and the latest phones, I shuffled around in hand-me-downs, clutching the ancient Nokia my grandmother had given me. Why can't I have new clothes like everyone else? I once dared to ask Mom. Her response was quick and dismissive. We can't afford it, Lizzie. Be grateful for what you have. But I knew better. I'd seen the designer bags Mom brought home, heard the plans for weekend getaways with Frank. There was money, just not for me. At school, I stuck out like a sore thumb. But to my surprise, my classmates were kind. They never teased me about my outdated clothes or ancient phone. Instead, they often went out of their way to help. "Hey Liz, want a ride home?" Sarah, a girl from my math class, would often ask. Her mom would smile warmly at me from the driver's seat, a stark contrast to the cold shoulder I got at home. I'd gratefully accept, knowing the alternative was a long walk home. Mom and Frank had made it clear that picking me up from school was not on their list of priorities. "You've got 2 legs, don't you?" Frank would say. "Use 'em." At home, there was no rest. Frank had an endless list of chores for me to complete. Cleaning, cooking, laundry, the work never stopped. And heaven forbid if I tried to take a break. "What do you think you're doing?" Frank's voice would boom if he caught me sitting idly. There's always work to be done in this house. Homework was to be completed perfectly, with Frank regularly checking my grades. Anything less than excellent was unacceptable. "A B-, he roared one day, waving my report card in my face. "You think that's good enough? No TV for a week. And forget about seeing your little friends." I'd nod silently, fighting back tears. The punishments were harsh, but arguing only made things worse. So I'd retreat to my room, bury my face in my pillow, and let the tears flow silently. Weekends at Grandma's became my lifeline. But even those were under threat. Frank had discovered a new form of punishment, denying me my visits to Grandma's house. "You failed that history test," he'd say with a cruel smile. "Looks like you'll be staying home this weekend to study." It broke my heart to lie to Grandma when she called, worried about my absence. "I'm sorry, Grandma," I'd say, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "I've just got so much schoolwork. I'll come next weekend, I promise." But next weekend would come, and Frank would find another reason to keep me home. It was a vicious cycle, and I felt powerless to break it. As I approached my 15th birthday, I made a decision. I needed some independence, some way to escape the suffocating control at home. So I applied for a job at the local diner. To my surprise, Frank approved. "About time you started contributing," he grunted. The diner became my sanctuary. The owner, a kind-hearted woman named Marge, took me under her wing from day one. She was everything my mother wasn't: caring, attentive, and genuinely interested in my life. She'd often let me leave early, especially on weekends. Those stolen hours with Grandma were precious. I'd arrive at her house, breathless and grinning, and she'd welcome me with open arms. "Elizabeth, my dear, what a lovely surprise," she'd exclaim, pulling me into a warm hug. I never told Grandma the whole truth about life at home. I couldn't bear to see the worry in her eyes, or worse, risk her confronting Mom and potentially losing my visitation rights altogether. So I kept my struggles to myself, painting a rosier picture than reality. As my 18th birthday approached, a tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, things would change. Perhaps Mom and Frank would finally see me as an adult, worthy of respect and kindness. How naive I was. The morning of my 18th birthday, I woke up with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I got dressed carefully, putting on the nicest outfit I owned, a hand-me-down blouse from a cousin and a skirt I'd found at a thrift store. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of my room, half expecting balloons or a happy birthday banner. Instead, I was met with Mom's cold stare. "Oh good, you're up," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I have news. I'm pregnant. We'll need your room for the baby. You can go wherever you want, but you can't stay here anymore." I stood there, stunned. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined for my 18th birthday, this hadn't even been on the list. "But, this is my home," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's eyes hardened. "This is my house, Elizabeth. You've been a burden on Frank for far too long. I need a calm environment for my pregnancy, and frankly, you stress him out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A burden? A source of stress? Was that all I was to them? "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, fighting back tears. Mom shrugged, her indifference like a knife to my heart. Go live with your grandmother. Get a job. I don't have money for college, so you're on your own there. But I expect you to come back daily to clean the house while Frank's at work. I can't do it in my condition. With that, she thrust a hastily packed bag into my hands and all but pushed me out the door. The lock clicked behind me with a chilling finality. I stood on the porch, my meager possessions at my feet, trying to process what had just happened. On my 18th birthday, instead of celebration, I'd been discarded like yesterday's trash. I trudged up the familiar path to Grandma's house, my eyes red and puffy from crying. Before I could even knock, the door swung open, and there stood Grandma, her face lighting up at the sight of me. "Elizabeth, happy birthday, my dear," she exclaimed, pulling me into a warm embrace. Then, noticing my tear-stained face and the bag at my feet, her expression shifted to concern. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I broke down again, sobbing into her shoulder as I recounted the morning's events. Grandma listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. "That girl. I can't believe she'd do this to her own daughter," she muttered, shaking her head. Then, squeezing my shoulders gently, she said, "Well, you're always welcome here, Elizabeth. Always." She ushered me inside, where I was greeted by the mouth-watering aroma of freshly baked cookies, my favorite chocolate chip ones. "I was hoping you'd stop by today," Grandma said with a wink. "Come on, let's get some food in you." As I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by all my favorite treats, I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. Grandma bustled around, pouring me a glass of milk and piling a plate high with cookies, mini sandwiches, and fruit. "Now," she said, sitting across from me, "we're not going to let your mother's foolishness ruin your special day. Why don't you call up some of your friends? We'll have a little party right here in the backyard." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I hugged her tightly before reaching for my phone. Within an hour, several of my classmates had arrived, bearing gifts and warm wishes. The backyard was soon filled with laughter and chatter. The smell of grilling burgers and hot dogs wafted through the air as we played games, shared stories, and simply enjoyed each other's company. For the first time in years, I felt truly celebrated. As the afternoon wore on, I made frequent trips into the house to refill the pitcher of Grandma's famous homemade lemonade. During one such trip, I overheard Grandma on the phone in the living room. "Yes, that's right. It's time," she was saying, her voice low but firm. "I think you should come as soon as possible. Tomorrow morning would be perfect." I paused, curious. Who was she talking to? And what was it time for? But before I could ponder further, I heard her wrapping up the call. "All right, I'll see you then. Thank you," she said before hanging up. When I entered the living room with the refilled pitcher, Grandma was there, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Having fun, dear?" she asked brightly. I nodded, deciding not to ask about the mysterious phone call. Whatever it was, I trusted Grandma. After all, she was the one person who had never let me down. The morning after my birthday, I woke up in Grandma's guest room, feeling more rested than I had in years. I was helping Grandma with the dishes when there was a knock at the door. To my utter shock, it was Mom. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Can we talk?" I stood frozen, unsure how to respond. Grandma gently squeezed my shoulder and nodded, so I stepped aside to let Mom in. She looked different. Smaller somehow, and definitely nervous. In her hands, she clutched a gift-wrapped package. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Mom began, her eyes darting around the room. "I don't know what came over me. Here, I got you a birthday present." I took the package mechanically, too stunned to speak. "Please, Elizabeth," Mom continued, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Come home. We can work this out." Grandma, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I'm glad you've come to your senses, dear," she said to Mom, her tone firm but not unkind. "But I'm afraid it's too late to change things now." Mom opened her mouth to argue, but at that moment, the front door opened. An elderly couple stepped in, and I watched in confusion as all the color drained from Mom's face. "Hello, Elizabeth," the woman said warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Happy belated birthday." The man beside her smiled and added, "We've been waiting a long time to meet you, sweetheart." Grandma stepped forward. "Elizabeth, these are your paternal grandparents. I asked them to come." My mind was reeling. The grandparents I'd never known, the ones Mom had always said wanted nothing to do with me, were here? And Grandma had invited them? They enveloped me in a warm hug, and I found myself instinctively relaxing into their embrace. "We have a lot to tell you, Elizabeth," my grandfather said, his voice gentle but firm. "Starting with the truth about your home." Over the next hour, they unraveled a story that left me speechless. The house I'd grown up in, the one I'd been unceremoniously kicked out of just yesterday, actually belonged to me. It had been left to me by my father and put in my name by my paternal grandparents after his death. "Your mother was allowed to live there with you," my grandmother explained, shooting a pointed look at Mom, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "But now that you're 18, it's your decision who lives there." I sat there, trying to process this bombshell. All those years of feeling like a burden, of being told I should be grateful for a roof over my head, and the house had been mine all along? "I own the house?" I stammered, my mind struggling to grasp this new reality. My grandparents nodded, while Mom sat silent. As I sat there, still reeling from the revelation about the house, my paternal grandmother gently took my hand. "There's more, Elizabeth," she said, her voice soft but firm. My grandfather nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "We've been sending your mother a monthly allowance ever since your father passed away," he explained. "It was meant to cover your expenses, clothes, school supplies, anything you needed." I felt my jaw drop. All those years of wearing hand-me-downs, of being told we couldn't afford new clothes or school trips. Had it all been a lie? "We wanted to be part of your life, to help raise you," my grandmother continued. "But your mother, she was against it." I glanced at Mom, who was standing in the corner of the room, her face a mask of discomfort and shame. "We didn't want to cause any trouble," my grandfather added. "So we kept in touch through your grandmother here. She's been sending us photos and updates about you all these years." Grandma nodded, squeezing my shoulder supportively. "And that's not all," my grandmother said. "We've been saving for your college education. We gave the money to your mother to set aside for you." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "College money?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned to Mom, who was now visibly squirming. "You told me there was no money for college. You told me I was on my own." The room fell silent, all eyes on my mother. She opened and closed her mouth several times, no words coming out. Finally, Grandma spoke, her voice uncharacteristically stern. "Tell her the truth, Amanda. You owe her that much." Mom's face cycled through various shades of red and white. We," she stammered, then took a deep breath. "Frank and we spent the money." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was in a surreal dream, or rather, a nightmare. "You did what?" My paternal grandmother's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Mom flinched. We needed it. We bought a car," she finally blurted out. "A car?" my grandfather repeated incredulously. "A luxury car," Mom added, as if that somehow made it better. "We needed it. Frank's job, appearances are important, you know." I stared at her, unable to comprehend the level of selfishness and deceit. All those years of scrimping and saving, of being told I was a burden, and they had been living it up with money meant for me? The room fell into a stunned silence as the magnitude of my mother's betrayal sank in. I felt a surge of anger rise within me, hot and fierce. "You're a fraud," I spat out, my voice trembling with rage. "You kicked me out of my own house after robbing me blind for years." Mom's eyes widened, and she held up her hands defensively. No, Elizabeth, you've misunderstood everything," she pleaded. I was going to surprise you for your birthday. I was going to tell you about the house and the money. I couldn't help it, I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you surprised me all right, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Kicking me out on my 18th birthday was quite the surprise. Congratulations, Mom. Mission accomplished. My paternal grandfather stepped forward, his face stern. Amanda, he said, addressing my mother, you need to return the money for Elizabeth's education. Immediately. Mom's face contorted with anger. I'm not giving anything back, she shrieked. Do you have any idea how hard it's been raising her on my own? That money is compensation for everything I've done. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Everything you've done? I echoed incredulously. You mean neglecting me, making me feel like a burden, and stealing from me? Mom turned to me, her eyes wild. Elizabeth, stop this nonsense and come home right now, she demanded. Something inside me snapped. It's my house, and I want you and Frank out. Now. Mom's face crumpled, and she pointed at her stomach. But I'm pregnant, she whimpered. You can't throw us out. Where will we go? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt, just a profound weariness. I could see that while her pregnancy might be real, her tears were just another manipulation tactic. That's not my problem, I said quietly. You should have thought about that before you stole my future. Grandma stepped forward and put her arm around my shoulders. I think it's time for you to leave, Amanda, she said firmly. You've done enough damage. As Mom continued to sob and plead, my paternal grandparents exchanged a look. We'll be pursuing legal action to recover the stolen funds, my grandfather stated. And we'll be helping Elizabeth secure her property. I watched as my mother's face cycled through shock, anger, and fear. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was, not the loving mother I'd always longed for, but a selfish, manipulative woman who had put her own desires above her child's well-being. The weeks following that fateful confrontation were a whirlwind of legal consultations, paperwork, and emotional upheaval. With the support of my grandparents, both sets of them, I found the strength to stand up for myself and pursue justice. We filed multiple lawsuits, one for compensation for moral damages, another for the misuse of the monthly allowance my paternal grandparents had been sending, and a third for the return of my college fund. Each document I signed felt like a step towards reclaiming my life. The most difficult lawsuit to file was the eviction notice for Mom and Frank. Despite everything, a small part of me still hesitated. Was I doing the right thing? You're not leaving them homeless, Elizabeth, Grandma reassured me, sensing my doubt. They're adults who made their choices. Now it's time for you to make yours. The day of the court hearing arrived all too quickly. I sat in the courtroom, my stomach in knots, as the judge reviewed our case. Mom and Frank sat on the other side, shooting me venomous glares. As the judge began to speak, I held my breath. In the case of Elizabeth versus Amanda and Frank Thompson, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Elizabeth. The relief that washed over me was indescribable. The judge continued, detailing the court's decision: full compensation for moral damages, repayment of all misused funds, return of my college fund, and the eviction of Mom and Frank from my house. I watched as Mom's face contorted with rage. She jumped to her feet, screaming obscenities, while Frank sat stone-faced beside her. As the bailiff escorted them out, Mom's final words rang in my ears. You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you. Those words, once so hurtful, now held no power over me. I knew the truth, and no amount of guilt-tripping could change that. The following weeks were a flurry of activity. Mom and Frank moved out, leaving the house in a state of disarray. It was cathartic, in a way, to clean and reorganize, erasing the traces of their presence from my life. With my newly recovered funds, I was able to enroll in a prestigious college in another city. The day I received my acceptance letter, I cried tears of joy, something I hadn't done in years. As I packed for college, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of changes in my life. In just a few short months, I'd gone from a neglected, gaslight teenager to a homeowner and college student with a supportive family. The day of my departure was bittersweet. I hugged Grandma tightly, promising to call often. "Don't worry about the house," she assured me. "I'll keep an eye on things while you're gone." My paternal grandparents drove me to my new campus, helping me move into my dorm room. As we said our goodbyes, my grandfather pressed a small box into my hand. "It was your father's," he explained. "We thought you should have it." Inside was a beautiful watch, engraved with the words, "Time reveals truth." How fitting, I thought, considering recent events. As I settled into college life, I found myself thriving. Free from the constant stress and negativity of my old life, I discovered a passion for learning and a confidence I never knew I possessed. I made new friends, joined clubs, and even started volunteering at a local youth center, hoping to help other kids who might be in situations similar to what I had experienced. Throughout it all, I maintained close contact with both sets of grandparents. Weekend visits home became something I looked forward to, filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of true family. As for Mom and Frank, I heard through the grapevine that they'd moved to another state. Mom had given birth to a baby girl. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy for my half-sister, hoping she wouldn't endure what I had. But I knew it wasn't my responsibility. I had my own life to live now.